always believed my apartment was the safest place in the world. A tiny one-bedroom space on the third floor of an old brick building, the kind that creaks when the wind blows and sighs when someone walks down the hall. I lived alone, worked long hours, and came home exhausted most nights. My routines were simple, predictable, comforting. My apartment was the one place where nothing unexpected ever happened. At least, that's what I thought. The first signs were small. So small, I kept convincing myself they didn't matter. A damp kitchen sponge, even though I hadn't cleaned anything that morning. Drops of water in the shower, long after it should have dried. My cereal box sitting slightly to the left from where I always place it. The toilet seat up, even though no one but me lived there, and I never left it like that. Little things, easy to dismiss, easy to blame on my own forgetfulness. But underneath the excuses, something deeper stirred, something cold and instinctive. A strange tightness in my stomach every time I unlocked my door. A sense that the air inside the apartment wasn't quite the same as when I'd left. A feeling like the walls had shifted by a fraction of an inch. Still, I didn't let myself believe anything was truly wrong. Not yet. Everything changed the day I came home early from work. I had a migraine so sharp it felt like someone was pushing a needle behind my eyes. I didn't plan to return until 7 p.m., but for once, I unlocked my door at 1 p.m., craving silence and sleep. The moment I stepped into my bedroom, I froze. My closet door was wide open. I never leave it open. I always double-check it before leaving. It's a habit so ingrained I don't even think about it anymore. Seeing it open like that felt like walking into a crime scene where the only victim was my sense of reality. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. My body locked in place while my mind tried to explain the inexplicable. I searched the entire apartment from corner to corner, every room, every drawer, every shadow. Bathroom, empty. Closet, empty. Under the bed, nothing. Behind the shower curtain, nothing. Kitchen cabinets, untouched. No intruder, no clues, no reason for the door to be open. But the fear didn't leave with the search. It stayed inside me, whispering, "Something is wrong. Something is watching." That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I decided I needed proof. Proof I wasn't losing my mind. Proof something real was happening. I bought a small motion-activated camera online, the cheapest one I could find. Nothing fancy, just enough to tell me if I had a second, unseen roommate living in my home. When it arrived, I hid it inside a fake plant on top of my fridge. The angle captured the hallway and kitchen, the only path someone would take if they were moving around inside my apartment. Then I left for work as usual and tried to ignore the dread twisting inside my chest. The following afternoon, around 2 p.m., while I was sorting files at my desk, my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. My whole body went cold. My fingers shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I rushed to the bathroom and locked the door, afraid someone might see the panic on my face. I opened the footage. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Just my quiet kitchen, sunlight pouring through the window, the stillness of an empty home. Then a shadow moved in the hallway. Not fast, not startled, slow and comfortable. A man stepped into view from the left side of the frame. He wore a hooded sweatshirt, hands relaxed at his sides, posture casual, too casual. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look like someone breaking into a stranger's home. He looked like someone returning to a place he knew. He walked straight to my refrigerator, opened it, took out my orange juice, sniffed it, made a disgusted face, and put it back. Then he opened my cutlery drawer, picked up a fork, examined it like he was critiquing it, and placed it back in a different spot. He didn't steal anything. He didn't move quickly. He didn't even seem to care that he might be caught. He was acting like he lived there. And then he turned down the hallway toward my bedroom and never came back into view. My camera didn't cover that area. I left work immediately, shaking so hard I could barely put my coat on. Every step home felt like walking toward a nightmare I wasn't ready to see. When I opened my door, the apartment looked exactly the same as when I left. No signs of forced entry, no disturbances, nothing missing. Except one thing: the fork drawer. The one detail that confirmed I wasn't imagining any of it. I took the video to my landlord, hoping for answers, support, anything. He watched the footage 3 times, his face growing paler with each viewing. Then he said something that chilled me to my core. "I know who that is." But he refused to explain, refused to answer questions, refused to look me in the eyes. He only muttered, "It's being handled," and changed my locks within an hour. Too quickly for someone who wasn't already prepared for this. That night, I tried to calm myself, telling myself the new locks meant safety. But around 11 p.m., as I was drifting into an uneasy sleep, I heard footsteps above my bed. Slow, heavy, deliberate. There is no apartment above mine, only a locked storage attic, a space only the landlord has a key to. I asked him the next day, voice trembling, if anyone could be up there. He told me I must have imagined it, and then he refused to talk about it again. I bought a second camera, and then a third. And still sometimes, when I come home, I swear I smell someone else's cologne in my hallway. Faint, unfamiliar, impossible to ignore. I don't know what terrifies me more, that someone was living in my apartment, or that the landlord knew about it. After the night I heard footsteps above my bed, sleep became a stranger. Every creak of the building, every settling beam, every shift of the wind through the vents felt like a presence moving just out of sight. I kept telling myself I was paranoid, that the cameras would protect me, that the new locks meant I was safe. But my own mind didn't believe a word of it. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, exhausted and jittery, replaying the sound I'd heard. Those slow, heavy footfalls. They weren't pipes. They weren't rats. They weren't the wind. They were human. I tried once more to confront the landlord. He opened his door only slightly, blocking most of himself behind the frame as if he were afraid I might push my way in. "There's no one in the attic," he insisted, voice tight, eyes refusing to meet mine. "You're stressed, you're overworked, and your imagination is playing tricks on you." "My camera caught someone in my apartment," I said, holding my phone up. "This isn't my imagination." He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. For a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt or fear. "I'm handling it," he repeated, and closed the door in my face. That was when the truth hit me. He wasn't protecting me. He was hiding something. I went back to my apartment, locked the door behind me, and stared at the ceiling above my bed. There was a square outline where the attic access panel was. I had never paid attention to it before. Now I couldn't look away. I set up my cameras, one facing the kitchen, one facing the hallway, and the newest one aimed directly at my bedroom ceiling. It made me feel a little better, like I was reclaiming some control. But that illusion shattered the very next day. Around 3 p.m., while I was at work, I got another notification. Motion detected. In the hallway camera. My stomach lurched. I hurried into the break room, locked the door, and opened the feed. At first, nothing. Then the attic panel moved. Not fully. Not enough to fall. Just enough to tilt, to shift, to let a sliver of darkness spill down like the opening of a mouth. A hand emerged. Pale. Thin. Slow. It gripped the edge of the panel with quiet, practiced ease. And then a man lowered himself halfway through the opening, hanging like some creature accustomed to climbing into places he didn't belong. His hood fell back. I couldn't see his full face, just the side of it, the jaw, the unshaven cheek. the glint of an eye. He watched the room below him, studying it, listening. He stayed like that for several seconds, unmoving, suspended between the attic and my bedroom. Then, with fluid, trained quietness, he pulled himself back up and closed the panel. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. This wasn't an intruder passing through. This wasn't a thief. This wasn't some lost person who stumbled in by mistake. He was living there, above me, right above my bed. And the landlord knew. I left work immediately, too shaken to pretend everything was normal. On the bus ride home, I replayed the footage over and over, each time feeling more nauseated. Had he been up there while I slept? While I showered? While I cooked, sang, talked to my friends on the phone? How many nights? How many days? Had I lived beneath someone hiding inches away from me? By the time I reached my building, my hands were trembling so violently I dropped my keys twice before finally opening my door. Inside, everything looked untouched. Perfect. Peaceful. A disturbing contrast to what I now knew. I walked slowly around the apartment, checking drawers, corners, behind doors, even opening the fridge as if expecting to find signs of him there. Nothing seemed disturbed, but the air felt different, heavy, used. And then my eyes went to the attic panel again. A faint smudge of dirt stained the edge. Proof. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even sit down. I stayed awake on the couch with all the lights on, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, afraid that if I blinked, the panel would move again. The next morning, with adrenaline still pumping through me, I printed the camera footage and marched straight to the police station. The officer behind the desk raised an eyebrow as I explained everything. When he watched the video, his expression changed completely. From skepticism to surprise to something closer to alarm. "Why didn't your landlord call us immediately?" he asked. "He said he was handling it," I replied. The officer shook his head. "No landlord handles something like this." He took my statement, filled out a report, and said they would send someone to inspect the attic. But the moment he stepped into my hallway and knocked on the landlord's door, everything went wrong. The landlord answered almost instantly, too instantly, as if he had been waiting. The officer asked for access to the attic. The landlord refused, flat out refused. He claimed it was unsafe, that there were liability concerns, that no one had been up there in years. The officer pressed him. The landlord didn't budge. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, sweat gathering at his temple. And then I noticed something. Behind him, inside his apartment, there was a second set of muddy footprints leading from his bathroom toward the hall closet. Footprints from shoes that looked too large to be his. My blood turned to ice. And that was the moment I realized something far worse. The man in my apartment wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a random intruder. He wasn't living there on his own. He was connected to my landlord. The landlord was hiding him, feeding him, protecting him, maybe even enabling him. The officer grew irritated and told the landlord they'd be back with a warrant. As soon as he left, the landlord slammed the door shut. I went back to my apartment shaking uncontrollably. I packed a small bag, ready to leave and never return. But before I walked out, I turned back for one last glance at the ceiling. The attic panel was slightly off-center, as if someone had moved it again, as if someone had listened to the entire conversation from above, as if someone knew I had gone to the police. And as I reached for the doorknob to escape, my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected. This time, from inside my bedroom. The footage opened. And there he was, standing halfway down the attic ladder, mask off, eyes staring directly into the camera, smiling. A slow, deliberate smile that told me one horrifying truth. He wasn't afraid of being caught. He was afraid of losing me. My blood turned to ice the moment I saw his smile. It wasn't wide or exaggerated. It was small, almost polite, as if he were acknowledging me, as if the camera wasn't a threat, but a way for him to finally be seen. I froze in my doorway, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to move. People in horror stories always talk about fight or flight, but no one ever mentions the third reaction, the one that feels like your soul tears free, leaving your body empty and paralyzed. That's what happened to me. My phone slipped from my fingers and hit the floor, screen still showing the live feed. He stepped down one rung, then another. The attic ladder creaked, bending under his weight, echoing across the silent apartment. How long had he been waiting for me to leave? How long had he been hiding up there, listening to every conversation, every whimper, every frightened breath? And even worse, what did he want? I forced myself to grab my bag, shove the door open, and run out. My heartbeat felt like it was punching through my ribs. The hallway stretched before me, too long, too narrow, too quiet. Every apartment door I passed looked suddenly wrong, shut too tightly, too still, as if the whole building was holding its breath. When I reached the stairwell, I nearly collapsed. My legs felt like water. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the railing. As I stumbled outside into the cold air, I turned back once, just once, and saw the lights flicker in my bedroom window. Someone was inside. Someone was moving. I bolted down the sidewalk until the building disappeared behind trees and parked cars. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station a few blocks away, where the fluorescent lights felt almost safe. Almost. I called the police again. This time my voice cracked as I explained. He's inside my apartment. Right now. He came out of the attic. He's smiling at the camera. Please. Please hurry. They told me to stay where I was. I stayed. 20 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up in front of my building. I watched from across the street, hugging myself so tightly my arms went numb. Officers stormed inside. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. When they returned, their faces told me everything. "Ma'am," one officer began, "your apartment is empty. The attic is empty. There's no one inside." I shook my head violently. No, you don't understand. He was there. I saw him." "We believe you," the officer said gently, "but whoever it was, he's gone now." Gone. Just like that. Like he had evaporated from the walls. They walked me upstairs. The apartment looked untouched. Clean. Still. But the attic panel? It was perfectly centered now. Flawlessly aligned, like a professional had installed it only moments before. I felt sick. The officers searched every corner while I stood silently in the doorway, afraid to enter. My apartment, once my sanctuary, now felt like a trap, like something alive and patient, waiting for me to walk deeper into its mouth. One officer stopped beside the flimsy ladder leading to the attic hatch. "There's no dust," he murmured. "None. Not even around the edges." "Because he moves it," I whispered. "All the time." The officer didn't answer. They asked the landlord again for attic access. This time, he refused even faster. He claimed the attic was unsafe due to structural damage, and that they would need a warrant to proceed. The police left with promises of further investigation. The moment they were gone, the landlord stepped into the hallway and stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Did you go into the attic?" I asked, voice barely audible. He didn't answer. He simply whispered, "Go back inside, you'll be fine." And then he shut his door with a soft click. That night, I didn't sleep in my apartment. I didn't even sit down. I dragged a chair into the hallway, outside my own door, and sat under the harsh fluorescent lights, hugging my knees. I watched the shadows under the door, listened for movement, waited for signs of breathing above the ceiling. None came. But around 3 a.m., a sound echoed through the hallway, a slow, rhythmic scraping from somewhere above. I looked up. The attic hatch in the hallway ceiling was shaking. Just barely. Just enough. If I had blinked, I would have missed it. Someone was crawling above the entire building. Someone was moving through the ventilation spaces like they were passages, shortcuts, familiar routes. Like a home. At dawn, exhausted and trembling, I packed every essential item into one bag and left the apartment building without looking back. But even a few blocks away, I could feel eyes on me. I turned. In one of the top floor windows, half concealed by curtains, someone stood watching. A silhouette. Still. Unmoving. Too tall to be anyone I knew. I didn't wait to see if he stepped away. I ran. I checked into a cheap motel that smelled of cigarettes and mold, but it had 4 locks on the door and no attic. For the first time in weeks, I slept. That peace lasted all of 5 hours. When I woke up, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Kitchen camera. My vision blurred as I tapped the notification. The man was back. Not in the attic. Not crawling from above. He was standing in the middle of my kitchen. Not moving. Just standing there. And he wasn't alone. Behind him, the landlord stood in the hallway. They were talking. Laughing. As if sharing an inside joke. And then the man lifted something toward the camera. Something small and metallic. My spare apartment key. He held it up like a trophy. The landlord clapped him on the back, and the man said something. Quiet. Muffled, but unmistakable. Don't worry, she'll come back eventually. The landlord nodded. Yes, they always do.
I dropped the phone. It slid off the cheap motel blanket and hit the floor with a dull thud, but I barely heard it. My breath came in ragged, painful bursts. My vision tunneled, the walls warped, the air felt too thick to swallow. They knew where I lived. They knew how to get inside. They knew everything. And somehow, they acted like I belonged to them. I pressed both hands against my mouth to stop myself from screaming. The motel room suddenly felt too small, too fragile, too easy to break into. My heart hammered so loudly I wondered if someone in the next room could hear it. The landlord and the stranger, together, working as one, talking in my apartment as if it were theirs. The image stabbed into my mind like a blade. Their laughter, his hand lifting the key, the landlord's face, relieved, almost proud, like a father praising a son. I scrambled to pick up my phone, fingers shaking violently. I rewound the video, hoping, praying I'd misunderstood. But no. The stranger stood comfortably, casually, like he'd lived there for months. Or longer. His hoodie was off now, revealing a simple black t-shirt and hair that was too clean, too tidy for someone supposedly hiding in attics. He didn't look homeless. He didn't look scared. He didn't even look like someone who had something to hide. He looked like someone with permission. The landlord leaned close to him, speaking softly, too softly for the camera to pick up. The stranger pointed to my bedroom hallway, and the landlord nodded, hands on his hips, analyzing the space like a contractor planning renovations. My home wasn't a hiding spot for him. It was a habitat, a place he moved through naturally, comfortably, with the blessing of the only person who should have protected me. My skin crawled. I watched the video again, this time focusing on the landlord's expression. He didn't seem angry at the man. He didn't seem threatened. He wasn't yelling or demanding he leave. He looked cooperative. And then the stranger spoke again. Just one sentence, but this time the microphone, by some cruel twist of fate, caught it clearly. She won't stay gone. She's scared, but she's attached. Attached. Attached? To what? To them? To the home they'd invaded? To the routine they'd quietly dismantled piece by piece? The landlord replied with something that made my stomach twist. This happens more often than you think. People panic, but they always return to what they know. My hand flew to my mouth. This happens more often than you think. More often. More often. Meaning, I wasn't the first. I might not be the last. The landlord stepped out of frame for a moment. When he returned, he was holding a grocery bag. One I recognized. My grocery bag. From my cupboard. He handed it to the stranger like they were sharing supplies. My nails dug into my palms so hard I felt my skin break. How long had this man been inside my home? Days? Weeks? Months? And how long had the landlord been helping him? The stranger took a loaf of bread out of the bag and ripped off a piece, eating casually. Then he walked toward my bedroom door, toward the attic ladder. He climbed up with practiced ease, as if climbing into a room he'd built himself. The landlord followed him and pulled the hatch shut from below. The lights flicked once and then went out. The feed ended. My body went numb. The motel room suddenly felt like a coffin. The walls were too thin. The lock was too weak. The shadows too deep. I sat fully awake the entire night, afraid to even blink. When the sun rose, weak and pale, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Unknown number. My throat tightened so painfully I almost choked. My finger hovered over the play button. When I finally pressed it, the message began with a long stretch of silence. Too long. Unnaturally long. Then, breathing. Not quick, not panicked, not angry. Slow, measured, patient. A man's breath. A man's. I froze, clutching the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. And then a whisper, calm and almost gentle. You left something behind. My blood ran cold. A rustle. Movement. Something brushing against fabric. Then he spoke again, even quieter. You'll need to come back eventually. The voicemail ended. I dropped the phone onto the bed and stumbled backward until my back hit the wall. My legs gave out, and I slid down until I was sitting on the carpet, trembling uncontrollably. What had I left behind? What did he have? My documents? My notes? My mail? My clothes? Something personal? Something only someone who'd been studying me would notice missing? Tears stung my eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. I wanted someone, anyone, to believe how real this nightmare was becoming. But deep down, a darker thought settled in my mind. If he recorded this voicemail from inside my apartment, then he had my phone number. Then he'd gone through my belongings. Then he'd touched my things. Then he'd stood in my space with the confidence of someone who believed he was entitled to it. My breathing quickened. What if he'd been waiting for me long before I even realized something was wrong? What if he'd chosen me? What if my landlord had helped him choose? I pressed my hands over my ears as if I could block out the memory of his whisper. You'll need to come back eventually. But the worst part wasn't the threat. It was the tone. He sounded certain. Certain I'd return, certain he understood me. Certain he knew something about me that I didn't know myself. A soft knock sounded at my motel door. 3 taps. Slow, even, deliberate. My heart stopped. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Another 3 taps, this time slower, as if whoever was outside had all the time in the world. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers and checked the peephole. My vision blurred. Standing right outside my door was my landlord, his clothes neat, his hands folded, his face expressionless. But his eyes looked tired. Tired in the way someone looks when they've been awake all night. Watching. Waiting. Listening. He leaned closer to the door, so close I could see the pores on his skin through the fisheye lens. And he whispered, I know you're in there. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound felt like a warning. The air felt different too. Heavier, almost aware of me. When the footsteps came again above my bedroom ceiling, Soft but steady, my entire body froze. The attic. The one the landlord swore no one could access. I held my breath and listened. Slow steps, moving toward the vent. Then silence. That silence was worse than the noise. I sat awake until morning, clutching a kitchen knife I knew wouldn't protect me but made me feel less helpless. The next day, I installed another hidden camera. Then a third. I placed one in the hallway, one in the living room, one pointing toward the attic door. I tried to act normal. Go to work. Smile when people asked how I was. Pretend I wasn't terrified of going home every night. But the cameras didn't lie. They kept catching shadows. Not full figures, just pieces. A shoulder slipping past a doorway. A hand brushing against the counter. A faint reflection of someone moving where no one should be. And every time I watched the footage back, I felt sick. Whoever it was, he was comfortable. Too comfortable. I confronted my landlord again. I showed him the footage. This time, he didn't even pretend to be surprised. He just looked tired, almost guilty. "I told you," he said quietly. "It's being handled." 3 days passed. Nothing happened. Then, one night I came home and felt it immediately. The air was wrong again. Not cold. Not warm. Just occupied. And the smell hit me. Men's cologne. A scent I'd never bought, never used. I checked every room. The windows were locked, the doors untouched. But my cereal box was moved. My shower tiles were damp. And the toilet seat was up. He wasn't breaking in anymore. He had never left. Handled. Like it was a leak or a broken light bulb. Not a man living in my apartment like a ghost I never invited. When I asked who the man was, he refused to answer. His eyes kept drifting toward the attic door like he was afraid it could hear him. That was the moment I realized he didn't want the truth out. Not because he didn't know it, but because he did. The fourth camera finally caught everything. Not just the man walking through my kitchen. Not just the way he moved around my apartment like it belonged to him, but the truth about where he had been hiding. The footage showed him climbing down from the attic hatch, quietly dropping into my hallway, like he had done it 100 times before. When I showed the video to my landlord, his face went white. He whispered, "I told him to stay out. I told him—" He stopped himself, but it was too late. I finally understood. It wasn't just my neighbor. It wasn't just my apartment. It was all connected. The attic, the silence, the lies. He hadn't just been living above me. He had been allowed to. And that was the part I may never recover from.